talk to you about this other chance. It's a situation. Good morning. We're going to call the meeting to order. Will everyone please rise to the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let me welcome everyone here this morning. We're going to move into our public hearing. I'd like to have a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Merman, second by is there further discussion? All those in favor, everyone on saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion adopted. Who's going to present on the public hearing?
Our CFO, Jeff Seward.
See?
He is in the building. He is a full disclosure. Mr. Seward got off an airplane. What time last night, Jeff?
7
p.m.
p.m. But it is 2:48 Hawaiian time right now, so a.m.
Aloha.
And there went all sympathy.
Good morning. Jeff Seward, Chief Financial Officer for HART. This morning, during our public hearing, we are asking for approval of Resolution R 2017-0727, authorizing approval of the proposed program of projects, holding a public hearing, which we are today, to receive input on the proposed projects and applying for and accepting all FY 2017 federal transportation funding. Why are we doing this? FTA requires all projects funded under Section 5307 and Section 5339 to develop a proposed program of projects, or POP, and provide an opportunity for the public to comment on said POP. FTA also requires a resolution from the HART Board to receive this funding. The item before you will serve to satisfy both of those requirements for the FTA and allow us to receive this money during FY17, which we had talked to you during the last month or so as being very much late in the process this year, based on the current administration not releasing this until the last couple of weeks. Actually, last week they actually released the full apportionment. So that's what we are going forward with today. So what exactly is the proposed program of projects? The Federal Register released July 5th, 2017, announced a full-year allocation of funding, I just mentioned. In the Tampa, St. Petersburg urbanized area, the available FTA funds are divided between HART, PSTA, Pasco County, and TBARTA based on a current interlocal agreement. HART received $13,184,903, or 44.34% of the UZA's Section 5307 funding. HART received $1,293,496, or 44.4% of the UZA Section 5339 funding. Under the 5307, preventative maintenance of buses and tires represents 73% of the funding used. ADA paratransit services are 20% of the funding. Other capital projects are 6%, and 1% is required by FDA to be spent on security-related expenses. Local match is provided by FDOT, Transportation Development Credits, which are a soft match. And with that, staff recommends approval of the POP, and we will move forward after board consideration to apply for and receive that funding as rapidly as possible.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Anyone here wishing to address Resolution R 2017-07-27? Anyone here wishing to address the item? Seeing none, what's your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Kemp, second by Commissioner Merman to approve Resolution R 2017-07-02. See no further discussion. All those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. Motion is adopted. We have a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second. Motion by Commissioner Merman, second by Reverend Bowers to close the public hearing. All those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. Motion is adopted. Now we'll call our regular meeting to order. Have a motion to approve the minutes that you received in your packet.
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Merman, second by Commissioner Kemp to approve the minutes from our June 5th, 2017 meeting. See no further discussion. All those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. Motion is adopted.
We'll now move to public input. Anyone wishing to address the board this morning on any items? We have 3 minutes. I don't have a list of anyone wishing to speak this morning.
There's one of mine. I'm not sure. I don't think he wants to talk about an agenda item.
Okay, all right. No one speaking on the agenda items. Okay. Now moves to the election of HART representative to the T-Bar Board of Directors. Mr. Smith.
Yes, good morning, everyone. As you know, there's been a change in the legislation dealing with T-BARTA. They've changed their composition of the board, and this organization has to decide who's going to represent it on that board. You have policies that deal with how you place people on external boards and how people man or chair committees. This is not specifically in your policy, but it is akin to an external board in which you elect the person who serves in that capacity. So it seems to be the prudent thing is to have an election of someone to serve on T-BARTA to represent HART. So under that understanding, what I'd like to do is open the floor for nominations for people to serve on T-BARTA representing HART.
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Merman.
Okay, Commissioner Merman is nominated. The floor is still open. Yes, ma'am?
I'd like to nominate Kathleen Shanahan.
I'm sorry, who was that? Kathleen Shanahan. Okay, got it. We have 2 nominations so far. The floor is still open if anyone wishes to make another nomination. Not seeing any, I think we can close the nominations. This is interesting. We finally have an actual vote, which we have rarely had. I think it'd probably be easiest just to have folks indicate who they're voting for. We'll take them one at a time in the order in which they were nominated. Yes, ma'am?
I'd like to speak to my nomination.
Certainly.
I'd like to say that I think it's significant and important to have a board member, to have a nominee, a person representing HART on T-BARTA that is an elected representative. I think that as an elected representative, you're held accountable to the public, and that's really important. And I know that Commissioner Merman's been out in the public a lot, hearing a lot, and I think it's very important that while this isn't at all directed to Commissioner Shanahan, we do have T-BARTA positions that are open for the governor to appoint, and I hope the governor would consider someone as well qualified and good as Director Shanahan for that position. But I think it's really important that this board put an elected person, a person that's accountable to the public, and a person that will be responsible in the end for our tax-based, if we're looking at a sales tax to support our transit, that will come from our county commission. They will be the people that will be making that vote. So I think it's very, very important to have that accountability on our T-BARTA board.
Does anyone else wish to speak to the issue before we hold the vote? Yes, ma'am.
Well, I suppose I do. I should allow you to speak for yourself, I suppose. However, I do want to say that I have nominated her because specifically she's not an elected official. And I think there are many times when we as elected officials have other duties that bring us to an opinion, and perhaps she would bring a fresh set of eyes to this board. So I'll allow her to speak for herself.
Ms. Shanahan?
Thank you. Well, as somebody who believes in the power of the elected position, as much as I really appreciate the nomination and respect your motivation, and I do think individual voices, anybody on this board, has put in the time and effort to become smart about the issue and the choices that this new T-BARTA board is going to have to face and lead on. I do think a lot of the, at least the initial integrity of the purpose of this restructured T-BARTA is going to be about bringing constituencies along way beyond, a single person having a single voice or an individual. And I have made the argument here that I think elected officials represent other people. I just hope that Sandy has the time to attend the meetings and participate and fully represents the HART board, because I think it's very important. This is a very important step in terms of the regional approach to a transportation solution. And I think it's very important to think about the integrity of who's on the board, not only who's on the board, what's the purpose of the board, who you're representing, where the funding comes from, and how that's all intersected in a way that is transparent and responsible.
Ms. Shanahan, did you withdraw, or are you still in contention?
Yeah, no, I would withdraw my nomination.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I completely agree with Councilwoman Donahue on this. I think it's time for us to reach out beyond the electeds to serve on these boards. That I think part of our issue in this community, for those of you who read the media and see what is going on out there right now, I don't think there's a confidence in our elected community at this point in time, and I think it's our responsibility to reach beyond that and bring somebody in that really is passionate about this, that has the knowledge as well. And I think everybody sitting on this board has the capability of doing it, and I think we tend to continue to put electeds on these positions, and I really believe now it's time for us to look beyond that and bring in somebody who does have reach within the community beyond just the electeds. And I do struggle with electeds being on there and making sure that they understand when they sit on a board like HART or like T-BART, that their responsibility is to that board, and sometimes we get caught up in their responsibility to the constituencies first, and I think we have to make sure that whoever we put on there understands that it's in the best interest of the board they serve on. So I would ask, under this circumstance, if we could reopen the nominations. Is that possible?
Okay.
It's up to the board. We don't have any specific rules. If the board would like to allow the reopening of the nominations. Yes, sir.
You never close nominations, so they're still open.
Okay, then you can make another nomination.
I would like to nominate Director Melendez.
Okay. Any further nominations or comments by anyone? Yes, sir.
Mr. Smith, and Mr. Chair, as a nominee, I'd just like to, I'm honored and maybe take a moment just to speak about the nomination. Well, Director Jacobs, thank you for the vote of confidence. It is greatly appreciated and a surprise, pleasant surprise. Commissioner Merman, I've obviously been nominated to be voted either for or against or considered alongside you. And had I not been nominated, I was going to share a few words. Having served with you on the legislative committee, I think you'd be a fine choice for this position. But with that, I had intended to cast my vote for you. It puts me in a bit of an awkward position, but I will say that as an appointee and a non-elect, I don't know. It's a bit sudden, but again, with all due respect to Commissioner Merman, I'll accept the nomination and let the chips fall where they may, I guess. So, but I just would add that Commissioner Merman, should you be voted in, I fully support you because again, I've seen the leadership you provided on the committees, and I think you provide a very good, multifaceted perspective on this new board. So, but again, I'm honored. Thank you.
Okay, any further nominations or comments? Yes, ma'am.
Just as a point of clarification, I'd like to make sure that this board knows that the governor does have, I believe, 4 appointees on the T-BARTA board, so it's not as if there isn't opportunities for that. And I think that that's a good balance. I think what we should send is an elected representative, and I do feel that Commissioner Merman, with her long experience in the MPO, on HART, on T-BARTA previously, and in the legislature, all serves to make, and also around throughout this community, would serve to make a good representative for us on T-BARTA.
Councilman Suarez.
I have a quick question. I've served with Commissioner Merman on T-BARTA previously, and now Commissioner Kemp. I'm gone, so it doesn't matter. And thank God for you didn't nominate me. In terms of the makeup of the board now, I mean, is there how is it made up? I know that there's the mayors of the 2 major cities, and then there are some gubernatorial appointees, but are there county commission appointees also?
I don't recall. I didn't bring the statute with me, unfortunately.
I'm trying to remember.
We have.
That was my question as well.
Representatives.
I do believe there are representatives from some of the other jurisdictions, yes.
Good morning, board members. Cameron Clark, I'm an assistant county attorney for Hillsborough County. I also serve as the attorney for T-Barta Board. There are 5 county commissioners. Presently, there used to be 7 on the old board, but now there are 5. There are the 2 mayors of St. Petersburg and Tampa. There is a board member from the PSTA board, a board member from the HART board, and 4 governor's appointees. So at a minimum, you're guaranteed to have a majority of elected officials, that being the 5 county commissioners and the 2 mayors. I was told, and I don't know this for a fact, but the PSTA board, I think, might be made up of all elected officials, so that would be another one if that's the case. And obviously, this board can appoint anyone on its board to be a member.
I guess the question was, is there also a county commission appointee to T-Barta specifically?
Yes.
Okay,
Each
that's what I was
of the
getting
5-member counties appoints one of its county commissioners to the T-Barta board.
And the reason I say that is because there's been some comment about there's, gubernatorial appointees, there's also county commission appointees. And in some ways, I think that I don't know if we necessarily need to have 2 elected county officials on T-Barta's board. I know that having served on it, it is difficult to make the meetings for me specifically, not for Sandy. Sandy's always made the meetings. I've always been a little bit late, well, a lot late sometimes. But one of the things that I think is important is having that kind of different mix of people that are on there so that you're not just with elected officials. And I think that's the point that we're trying to make with the nomination of Mr. Melendez and Ms. Shanahan. I think that having that mix is important on the T-Barta board because it does give you a different feel as to what's out there and what's going on. Because for us, I think that having served on T-Barta for about 6 years, the difficulty was whether or not we were actually going to go in a certain direction based on everyone else's concerns, and there was really no center there, and that was a problem because if you don't have a center, there's no way you know where the focus and direction is. So I think that it would be great to have someone who is a non-elected. There's no offense to anybody here, please, but I think that that's a good direction to go in. So I hope that, and Mr. Melendez, if you are willing to serve, the amount of time and effort that it takes on T-Barta and the amount of boredom and repeat presentations that you're able to handle, just remember that is a concern. So I hope that everyone understands that it's not, if we don't put a county commissioner on from this board, there's another chance for a county commissioner to continue to serve on the T-Barta board, so it doesn't eliminate it.
Commissioner Miller.
I'd like to ask Mr. Clark to come back to the podium, please. Has the Hillsborough County Board of County Commissioners appointed anyone yet to the T-Barta board?
They have not.
So we still have an opportunity to appoint someone, right?
Yes, per the statute, the way the statute's written strongly implies they want member bodies to appoint a new member, even if they were currently
So will
part
the
of the
Board of County Commissioners of Hillsborough County will be appointing a member?
Yes, I believe that's on your next agenda on Wednesday, sir.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Well, these types of votes are never easy. Mr. Melendez, I consider you to be a friend. We've worked really well together on some key issues. Hillsborough County, I think of it as sort of ground zero, the transportation discussion. It's certainly a significant population center, economic center. I look at someone like Commissioner Merman and look at her background and the relationships that she brings to the table, her ability to navigate Tallahassee politics, certainly local politics. I know that the Hillsborough County Commission and other county commissions in the Tampa Bay area are going to be pulled in a million different directions in the next couple of election cycles as we continue this transportation debate. I know Sandy will have her thumb on the pulse of what's going on, both front and center and frankly behind the scenes as we have these discussions. So with that being said, I'm going to throw my support towards Commissioner Merman. But certainly we don't know what they're going to do over on the Pinellas County side. They could end up with 2 Pinellas County commissioners on
Well, they will.
this board.
They have only elections.
Yeah. So at any rate, I just wanted to say that for all it's worth. But certainly think of you as a friend, and these are always tough. So.
Any further, Commissioner Mills?
We've already heard Mr. Clark, Cameron Clark, say that the Board of County Commissioners will appoint, I think at this meeting coming up on Wednesday, a county commissioner. I think it's a breath of fresh air to have a non-elected from this board serving on the T-Bar. Mr. Melendez has already said he would have the time. I think he is smart enough to go over there and represent this board adequately and bring fresh new ideas. So I'm going to be supporting Mr. Melendez.
Any further comment? We have yet to close the nominations as well.
I just want to say Pinellas County is going to have 2 county commissioners on T-Barda. Just want that to be clear to everybody. And, legislatively, they have the strength and powers in Pinellas County right now. I think we need to understand that from a state perspective. So I just wanted to make those points very clear. I just have to say I'm grateful, Pat, that you nominated me. I was kind of surprised. I wasn't prepared for it. Actually, I don't want to run against Kathleen Shanahan, who's my dear friend, or Mr. Melendez. So, chips will fall where they may. I guess this could go either way. But I just want to say I think the comment about the loss of confidence in electeds right now really kind of got to my heart. I think we're working as hard as we can every day and every level of government here in Hillsborough County. And, we're trying very hard on transit, trying very hard. We're waiting for this premium transit plan to get done. And this new T-Barda, what they're trying to put together with the new T-Barda is going to help strengthen that direction that we're headed. And I think that that's extremely important for this region as we move forward. But I thank you, Pat.
Councilmember Donahue?
I think I'm the one who started this mess about elected official. And as an elected official, I can throw that, curveball. I just want to say my main reason for nominating someone who is not a Hillsborough County representative was just for that fact. I understand St. Petersburg will have 2, but I felt that we needed to spread the viewpoint, I suppose, and that was my only reason in not nominating either one of you 2 fine representatives, because you are well versed in transportation, absolutely. So please understand, and I agree with you. I hate to think that people don't trust elected officials, because if they saw the homework we do, they would wonder why they don't trust us. We're working very hard at what we do. So thank you, and good luck to both of you.
Commissioner Kemp?
Again, there are 4 gubernatorial appointees, and I think that we put ourselves as Hillsborough County in a very much weaker position. I agree with you, Commissioner White. We have someone here who's extremely experienced and knowledgeable with depth, and our county is far bigger than the other counties in the region and is really ground zero, as Commissioner White said, for transportation, and for us not to be equally on equal footing on T-Barda in terms of our county's strengths and putting forward an elected person who also can go through the community and start to build consensus and put out kind of the is there constantly meeting with people and starting to draw in the kinds of support for a regional transit system. I just think that is extremely important, and I think we do ourselves harm if we were not to be supporting Commissioner Merman in this position.
Director Jarosh?
This is Sophie's choice. But I'll tell you the point of view that I'm coming from, and that is as a non-elected who considers myself an equal to everyone on this board, elected and non-elected. So I look to the makeup of T-Barda, and even though there are 4 gubernatorial appointees, they very specifically limit it to the regional business community leaders, which excludes a lot of citizens and subject matter experts who may have a differing point of view. Therefore, again, I think either one will serve tremendously, but I will be supporting Director Melendez.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm reading the tea leaves here. So I think that we're being very short-sighted, I'll be honest with you. But did we close the nominations? Did we close?
We have not yet closed them.
Okay. I'm going to withdraw and renominate Ms. Shanahan.
Ms. Shanahan, will you accept that nomination?
Yes, I will. I was going to ask to speak. I mean, this is like because I do think, I want to pick up on two comments. I agree we're being short-sighted. I think this transition, this transportation, transit, regional debate has been going on in Hillsborough for 20 years. I think we are losing federal money. I think we're losing state money. I think we're losing, the ability to really be a next generation region because of our non-regional approach, not necessarily acquiescing the taxing authority, but just the concept of working together. And so, part of this whole reboot for T-BARTA was to sort of get it kicked off in the right direction. And I think the legislative leadership, from a perspective of the next, 4 or 5 speakers of the House and the next 2 or 3 presidents of the Senate, are very focused on this being a way to look at directing funds and supporting advocacy for federal funds through a regional approach and the strength of that. I think, with all due respect, even though we're all equal as individuals, there is a difference in elected officials with the power of who they communicate with. Like I said at one point, I don't send out a newsletter every Friday that goes to 250,000 people or 50,000 or 100,000. I don't do that. And so, the power of the newspaper coverage of whatever the points are is limited. I don't have a blog. I tweet. I do stuff. But you have to. I really think that that we are representatives, and I think elected officials represent the voters of who is in their jurisdiction. So, I think Hillsborough, we will be very short-sighted if we put a non-elected person with reach beyond their neighborhood, so to speak, whether it be their professional neighborhood or their where they live neighborhood, and then you have PTSA with two commissioners, and you have whatever other that we should be smart enough to say we should be sending a note from our chairman to the governor recommending people to serve on this board. If we want 3 members of the HART Board to be on there because we're knowledgeable, let's move to get, advocate for that and send a note to the governor's office saying these 3 citizens, represent our representatives of, be aggressive about owning the ability to direct the T-BARTA mission and focus. It's sort of like when you sit back, what happens to you, and we're not being strategic about this. And now we've turned it into a personality choice, which is unfortunate, because this is really an opportunity for, I think, for the strength of building on regional funding. Mm-hmm. And I think if we go down, I know we already had a conversation about the financial impact of where we are, where we could be, and I was somebody who believed that the county commissioners 2 years ago should have taken it to the voters and let the voters pick. The voters are knowledgeable about this struggle of transit and transportation, and they should be engaged in this process. And, I don't think that the HART Board should be deciding if we're going to raise taxes. I don't think that's our role. That's the role of the elected officials. That's my own personal opinion. So, I'm happy to be a contender for this position. I think we are not maximizing the leverage that is perceived, whether we want to admit it or not, in this circle of equals, an elected person versus a non-elected person. But I'm happy to be a representative of this board on HART, and you all know how I feel and where I'm headed in terms of my intent and my support.
Anybody else wish to be heard? Yes, sir.
I have a question.
Director Shanahan, are you saying you accept the nomination, or are you saying?
Yes, sir. I did accept the nomination.
That's what it is.
And Commissioner Merman, I believe you said you withdrew.
I withdraw.
So you
They
are,
want an elected official, so obviously the votes are swinging.
so she didn't convince
The
you to
other
come
way.
back in.
Pardon me?
She did not convince you to come back in.
I think we should be head to head with Pinellas County. I mean, you guys, we're going to lose.
Right.
I'm serious. I am looking at the state budget and seeing 90 million go to Pasco, all these millions go to Pinellas, and I'm going to tell y'all, it's all in the political influence. And if you think otherwise, you're just not looking at the facts. And I want this board to be well represented. So and if everybody, this is a debate that continues on this board, electeds versus non-electeds. It is, and you know what? Senator LaBella changed the PSTA board in small language in the budget bill that made their board with just electeds. And so I'm just saying, beware, that may happen here one day. And we will be sitting here and wondering, what did we do? I'm not going to, unless, the board's going to swing that way, but it's not. So I'm accepting what it is. I thank you very much for the nomination. I wasn't prepared. I was very surprised, actually. And it's nothing against you, Director Melendez, at all. But obviously, we have got to put our strongest foot forward here and have the person that has the biggest political reach that we can have to make sure that we get funds here in Hillsborough County.
This is clearly an important topic, but I do think we need to try to bring it to closure. Is there anyone else who wishes to make a nomination, and we'll close nominations? I just have one comment, given kind of the shift. If
Sure.
no other nominations. Are there any other nominations? Not hearing any, can we close the nominations?
We'll close the nomination.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nominations are now closed. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, Mr. Chair. Again, it's an honor to be nominated, and Nikki, I really appreciate it, and I greatly appreciate all the comments that were offered. And again, it's an honor to be considered even amongst Kathleen Shanahan and Commissioner Mervin. And that being said, I maintain, I accept the nomination, and I do so with respect. And I just want to note this kind of a campaign, maybe a mini campaign speech, but also I want to give a nod to Ms. Shanahan. I've served with her on committees, and I think that what I've appreciated about her is her spirit of accountability. I think we've all seen that, and I think that would be well served if she wins this vote. In addition, I can't argue with her political background and her political connections. So I think, again, looking at this objectively as a board member, I think those are two qualities of Ms. Shanahan that she would bring to the T-BARTA board as a non-elect. What I'd like to say about myself is, again, this is, I've just had time to kind of chew on this in these brief moments here. This would be an opportunity for me to even renew my commitment to the HART Board. I served on several committees for a number of years. The Audit Committee, which then became the Finance and Audit, the Governance Committee, chaired them, actually been elected as chair. So I just want to let you know that I may not have the political background, but if I am the winner of this vote, what I will commit to even strengthening my commitment to HART. I am passionate about our mission, about what we've accomplished, and this is an incredible opportunity. You've seen where I come from, and I'll just my background. I'll leave it at that. Thank you. And again, it's an honor. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I do have to ask you, because I believe that your position on this board as appointee from the governor is you're up for reappointment, that
Yes.
you are past due on your,
Yes, I'm quote unquote serving until we leave. Yes.
okay, so,
So I'm waiting for reappointment.
I mean, I know. I'm not saying, I just don't want to be back here in 3 months discussing this again. I appreciate everything you've done. You're a good friend, but I think we have to be very mindful of that fact.
And,
Thank you.
And I would, yeah, I think that's a prudent point to consider as well.
Any last comments before we move to the vote? Not seeing any, I think we'll take a vote. We'll just, for lack of a better way, we'll do it alphabetically. All those who are in favor of Director Melendez for this appointment, please indicate by raising their hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. I believe that's our vote, Lena. Okay, all in favor of appointing Ms. Shanahan, please indicate by raising your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I believe we have our appointee. It'll be Ms. Shanahan. Thank you very much for your attention. And thank you, Cameron, for your help.
Mr. Smith, I do believe we have to have an alternate also.
Pardon?
We have to have an alternate.
Oh, you do have to have an alternate?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to open up nominations for an alternate? Or do you want to?
If I could make a motion for acclamation to make Mr. Melendez the alternate.
I second that. There's a first and a second by acclamation. Any discussion on that issue? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign? You have it. You have your appointee and your alternate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was the easiest part of the agenda.
Gee, and that was only item 1.
Okay. We're going to move to the presentation.
Thank you.
Mr. Seward.
Good morning, Jeff Stewart, Chief Financial Officer, and I will do this as quick as possible. Pursuant to Florida Statute 200.65, HART has 35 days from the receipt of the final property valuation from the Hillsborough County property appraiser to certify our tentative millage for FY18. The following data will be certified to our property appraiser subsequent to this board meeting. The prior year millage, which we are currently in at FY 2017, is set at our charter cap of 0.5 mils. The proposed not to exceed millage for 2018, which staff is recommending, is to keep millage at exactly the same rate as we have for this year, again at the charter cap of 0.5. The rollback rate for 2018 is 4.773 mils, which is 4.76% below the proposed millage rate of 0.5. And just as a reminder of what the rollback rate is, if we were not to certify our millage for this year, we cannot receive any additional ad valorem funding from the prior year, and we would have to set our millage at 4.46%, 4.76%. The first public hearing to tentatively approve the millage and tentative budget is September 11th at 5:30 p.m. at our EBOR headquarters. Information about what that 0.5 would mean for HART for 2018. The certified property valuation for Hillsborough County for HART, $84,658,411 and $186. It's an 8.89% increase in property valuation. Proposed not to exceed millage rate again is 0.5, the same as this year. That would generate $42.3 million of revenue. We budget per Florida statute only at 95%, which would be $40.2 million, which is a $3.2 million increase in revenue over FY17. And with that, staff recommends approval of the proposed millage.
Are there any questions? Now, this will be voted on during the action items. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, this is just a presentation. Ms. Shanahan.
Can I just ask you, can you explain again the rollback rate? I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around it.
If for some reason HART did not fulfill that 35-day requirement, we could, by law, we could not receive any more ad valorem than we had already received in FY17, which, due to the property valuation increase,
would be that.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Jones. Good morning.
Morning, Chair, morning, Board. Thomas Jones, HART Environmental Program Manager. I'm going to quickly and succinctly give you all a report out of sustainability metrics for HART. The data that you'll be looking at are from calendar years. For sustainability reporting, we do report out in calendar years versus a fiscal year. A lot of the reporting frameworks and guidance are international, and they require you to get on a calendar year so that you can benchmark across sectors. Everybody has different fiscal calendars. So I just wanted to point that out because you'll see that the title of this presentation is 2016 Sustainability Performance Metrics. And I want you to understand that these are calendar years ending in the December 2016. So with that said, I'll move forward. In 2014, in the fall of 2014, HART established a sustainability program through the establishment of an environmental management system. At that time, we decided to make our baseline year in terms of tracking our performance calendar year 2013. So you will see the metrics that we'll look at. The baseline year for these metrics are calendar year 2013. And hopefully moving forward, we hope to make this a routine report out and report out closer to the end of the calendar year, maybe the first quarter of the next calendar year, so March-ish of next year. Hopefully we'll close out this year's reporting. Some key takeaways. We'll talk about, you'll see the CNG transition and the economic value that has been provided by that transition, as well as the improved environmental performance. And I think also the presentation will open up discussion for some materiality as it relates to electricity consumption and waste generation at HART, both of which are significant for us in terms of operations. This next slide, I won't spend a lot of time on it, but this is our sustainability objective map. And this is basically how we articulate how we're going to get from where we are to where we need to be. It's a classic approach to sustainability management with a focus on changing internal culture, which hopefully drives innovation, which ultimately provides more value proposition to taxpayer dollars at the end. Within our sustainability program, we have 4 programs, 3 which are currently established with measurable metrics. The first being, and probably the most prevalent and known, is our carbon reduction program, which has a 17% goal, as well as our electricity use, which was a 5% goal, and water use, which was a 10% goal in reduction. Recently, we are in the process of establishing a new program focusing on spills. We've had at our facility, we've had in the past several legacy spills in which we've had various environmental compliance efforts to manage those spills at 21st Avenue. These go back to the late 80s, early 90s. So we're actually kind of building a program to look at how we can better mitigate those things from happening in the future. This first slide, or this first metric slide that you're looking at, is our fleet carbon performance, and this is for all modes of service. So this is fixed route, paratransit, and flex services. In 2013, the way we measure this is relative to service. So what you're looking at is CO2 per revenue vehicle hour. In 2013, which was the last year in which we didn't have any alternative fuel vehicles, we began to transition in the latter years from unleaded and diesel fuel to CNG. So 2013 serves as our baseline. In that year, we were just above 1 metric ton of carbon per revenue vehicle hour. Over the next several years, from 2013 to 16, you can see a decline, which is what we want to see, to the tune of 22%. Our goal, again, was 17% by the end of this year, so we've gotten there. At the back of this presentation, I know we're not going to discuss it today, but you all have the ability to get copies of this presentation. You may have a paper copy, I'm not quite sure. There's an appendix that shows the breakout for each mode of service and what this looks like for each mode of service. Some are performing better than others, and a lot of that has to do with the size of those services. So, for example, our paratransit fleet has pretty much been entirely converted over to CNG, whereas our bus fleet, which is the largest part of our fleet at 189 buses, we're at maybe about a third of the way with the buses we have coming in this year. So it's a matter of numbers in terms of the volume of vehicles that we have. This next slide is fuel consumption by type. This is, this is exactly what you would expect to see. Obviously, as we transition from CNG or from diesel and unleaded to CNG, our CNG consumption increases, and we see particularly our diesel consumption begin to trail off. This next slide is actually pretty interesting to me, which is looks at our overall cost for fuel, irrespective of the fuel type. And so you can see in 2013, we're up around $8 million in fuel expenditures across the diesel and unleaded fuel types. I'd like to point out that you see CNG begin to come into play in 2014 and into 2016. Sorry about that. Okay. You can see last year a tremendous reduction in overall expenditure when compared to 2013, a 43% reduction to be exact. That's partly attributed to the cost of CNG, but also our procurement folks have done a really good job reducing our per unit cost on the diesel side of the house. So it's not just CNG by itself, but also procurement and procurement strategies. I'd also like to point out that the way that we quantify the cost of CNG includes not only the cost of the gas itself, but also the electricity, the cost of electricity to run our plant, as well as our operations and maintenance costs that we pay our third-party service provider to maintenance our system. And so this is an entirely representative cost of what it is to have CNG as an alternative fuel. To that point about electricity use, this is our facility electricity consumption. And within this, we look at all of our facilities. We do not include bus stops or the streetcar, some of the streetcar stops, some of the smaller streetcar isn't here. Metro Rapid, which has electrified stops. They're such a small share of our total consumption. We don't measure those, but all of our facilities are here, from the main facilities, the maintenance facilities, admin facilities, on down to the transit centers. And we measure this in terms of relative to service as well. So we're looking at kilowatt hours per revenue hour, and you can see that we were in 13 and 14, we began to trend downward. In 14, we had the renovation at 21st. A lot of efficiency improvements were made in that building as it relates to HVAC systems and lighting. In 15, you will see a bump up. That is an unintended consequence. That is us transitioning to CNG. In order to put natural gas in a vehicle, it has to be compressed. Compressors use electricity. And so while we have a reduction in carbon on the fleet side of the house, we have a subsequent increase in electricity consumption on the other side of the house. There's a bit of a trade-off there. And so now we're kind of focusing on this next couple of slides. We'll show that, but we're kind of focusing on honing in on some of those more significant consumers of electricity. In 15, we had a bump up. In 16, we began to bump back down. So I want to take these next two slides and kind of show you both sides of that picture. This is our electricity consumption and subsequent costs at the CNG station itself. Obviously, you can see as we consume more CNG, we're going to consume more electricity. And you may remember that a couple of months ago, we had a contract where we were going for a new O&M service provider for the CNG station. And within that contract, because we've identified some efficiency improvements that can happen here with electricity as it relates to CNG consumption, we actually put performance language in that contract to reduce the consumption of the station, increase the operational efficiency. We basically have tied performance into payment for that service. And we've had some very strict guidelines in there and we've asked them to reduce our consumption by 25% while also not affecting our fill rates or the time that it takes us to fill a bus from empty to full. So you can see this is trending upward, and we will continue to see it trend upward as we consume more natural gas. So obviously getting out in front of how can we make that equipment more efficient and realize and leverage gains is important. The opposite end of that spectrum is this building that you're in right now. This is electricity consumption and subsequent greenhouse gas associated with that consumption for this facility, pre-renovation and post-renovation. And so in this facility, when we did the renovation, there was a large component focusing on heating and cooling. This building was not originally designed to have inhabitants on this third floor. And because of that, we didn't have drop ceilings, and we didn't have the type of HVAC system that you would have for building occupancy. The drop ceilings that were put in help us or stopped us from heating and cooling an attic space, which is essentially what we were doing before we had drop ceilings. So you can see a significant reduction in both environmental impact and energy consumption, and there's also a significant reduction in cost to the tune of approximately about 30% in each area. So representatively, that's about 275,000 kilowatt hours, 140 metric tons of carbon, and $24,000. I think it's important when we have the discussion of electricity consumption as it relates to our operations over a time spectrum from 2013 to present. I think it's important to understand what our electricity consumption footprint looks like. Where are our significant consumers? I think it's also significant in being able to understand that as we look forward with potential projects as far as addressing that consumption. Here you can see back in 2013, approximately 60% of our consumption comes from 21st Avenue, which is kind of what you would expect to see, with another approximate quarter coming from 7th Avenue, and then all of our other facilities attributing to the last 20%. This is how that has changed in the course of that time frame. 7th Avenue, because of the efficiency improvements that we just discussed, has reduced its consumption significantly. And obviously a lot of our consumption, more of our consumption, even now so than before, is happening at 21st. So in terms of focusing our efforts on efficiency improvements and pushing the envelope and what's next, like what we need to be looking at down the road, it's very clear where we should be focused. Next slide is our facility expenditures. Back in 2013, closer to $400,000 a year. We're up around $500,000 a year as we currently in 2016 moving into 17. This next slide is electricity consumption and greenhouse gases right next to each other. And you would see, obviously with a corresponding increase in electricity consumption, you're going to see a corresponding increase in cost as well as environmental impacts. Our facility water consumption, this is also measured in terms of service. So these are gallons of water consumed per vehicle revenue hour. And obviously, we're not going the right direction on this specific metric. We've identified some issues. There are some very specific facilities that are contributing to this, and the next slide will kind of show you year-over-year performance from 2015 to 2016. The biggest one of those being UATC, the University Area Transit Center. We had an issue with that building related to a supply line that was undetected. Had an issue with it, had a leak. It was undetected for quite some time. We've resolved that issue, and so next year's report out, you'll see this number trail back down to where it should have been. But that increase is largely associated with that particular issue. It was something that did not readily present itself because for a long portion of time we had the bathrooms closed at that facility for renovation, and so if we were probably using those facilities in its normal capacity, we probably would have seen some effect in water pressure and been able to detect this issue a lot sooner than we did. But because we weren't using very much water at the facility, it went undetected for quite some time. Lastly is our solid waste and recycling. Solid waste, specifically coming out of operations at 21st, is material for us. We have a lot of scrap metal. These solid wastes don't include anything like spent oil, used oil, or any regulated waste. These are more along the lines of your standard solid waste, scrap metal, and trash, administrative waste, those kinds of things. As you can see at 21st Avenue, we produce quite a bit of waste that comes out of operations. So we're actually currently looking at designing some initiatives and programs to assist with mitigating some of those waste streams that come out of operations, specifically maintenance. You can see on the right-hand side the two mixed municipal recycling programs with 17 and 11 metric tons of recycling, respectively. Those are programs that were initiated in 2016 at both the eBoard facility as well as at MTC, and those are doing fairly well. We've increased our landfill diversion rate, which is basically the volume of trash that doesn't go to the landfill and is instead recycled, from 0% to about 10%, and at the same time reduce our solid waste management costs at those two facilities by 15%. And so now we're looking at taking the lessons learned from those facilities and applying to 21st, which is where we have the majority of our waste coming in. Forward looking, there's obviously, you guys have been involved respectively to a large extent with the development of the HART operational scorecard. We're taking the same approach to sustainability and trying to create and integrate a balanced scorecard that goes a little bit further than some of these metrics that we're looking at today. We're also evaluating the use of renewable energy at several of our facilities, specifically when it relates to where we consume power. 21st Avenue here at eBoard, as well as at MTC, and we also responded to Florida Department of Environmental Protection's RFI related to the Volkswagen settlement, and we responded to that RFI for EV charging stations. Specifically at this point, we are looking at workplace charging, so employee engagement and allowing our employees to charge their EV vehicles at 21st. We have that capacity here in the city of Tampa parking garage, but we don't necessarily have that there. And maintenance is also committed to, if we can secure EV chargers, looking at transitioning some of our fleet vehicles to full EV technology as well, the non-revenue fleet, not the revenue side of the house at this point in time. I think it's probably goes unnoticed, but we drive quite a bit in non-revenue vehicles as it relates to transit supervisors and some of the backbone support that goes into the network, to the tune of about 500,000 miles per year. So you're talking about a significant amount of consumption. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Any questions, Mr. Drew?
Thank you. Yeah, very good presentation, as always, Thomas. Question on the water consumption. Do we get charged from the county, or where do we get our water supply from?
So that depends on the geographic location of the meter itself. The majority of our water service comes from the city of Tampa. We have at Northwest, I believe, is the only account that is not with city of Tampa, is with BOCC. So city of Tampa is our provider.
And just trying to identify, obviously there was an issue with the water up at the university. Do we look at the bills? I'm just surprised that it didn't get noticed. It went that long to double the amount of usage. So do we have we identified and done some corrective action so this won't happen again?
Yes, we're working on implementing a process where we have a review. A lot of what I'm doing is in arrears, 3 or 4 months in arrears. So within finance, we're addressing, how to move forward with balances and checks month over month. What happened here, I can tell you, is that you had that consumption change from 1 month to the next, and once you don't catch it in that very moment, when you get that following month's bill, the previous reference point is
Right.
that high bill.
Exactly.
And so you don't,
Gotcha.
if you're not necessarily attuned or adept at looking at these things, it's easy to miss. Even when they have the 12-month rolling, which they provide on the water bill, again, once you miss that transitional month, it looks like business as usual.
Gotcha.
So to your point, we definitely are looking at what can we do, obviously from a quality perspective, to ensure that obviously this never happens again. We can't allow this to happen again at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. Great briefing. This is all historical data. Do you have any forecasts for 17 and 18?
I currently do not have any forecast for 17 and 18, sir. I've tracked 17 up to about April of this year at this point, so I do have I have somewhat current, but to be quite honest with you, it's a very large data set, and while I would like to get to being more predictive, we're just not quite there yet.
On the two things, do we publish this report somewhere? I mean, I do think from an ancillary perspective, this is a subject matter that really does move millennials and sort of the younger voters that we have as a transit system that's focused on sustainability and setting metrics and being transparent in the measurements. So I would hope that there's some sort of follow-on publicity. I mean, you could do a whole did you know questions on the buses. I ride the bus a lot in New York, and I see that, they are very big on sustainability, and they have these questions on the buses. So I just would encourage you to do that, because I think it's an important investment in the system on all fronts. The other thing is you said one of your goals was to do alternative renewables. Do we have any solar, and would we do anything where we might partner with some private sector and do like a P3, where we would bring in a partner and say on the 21st Street Center, we're going to put up solar, or on this building, we're going to put up solar, and go at saving that cost? Because as everything becomes more and more EV, those electricity costs are going up, and you're sort of a wholly owned payer to one provider, that there's not, unless you create your own competition, it's going to be a struggle. So I just would encourage you, within the justification of your procurement system and options, is to really look at that and sort of talk to the marketplace and see if there are ways to partner with some of the people in the private sector.
So I don't know if you would technically call it a P3, but we have been engaging and having internal dialogue. In fact, we have a portfolio steering committee meeting coming up. That's where our directors and chiefs evaluate project concepts, and within that next one is a presentation for moving forward with solar energy systems at those facilities, using possibly a mechanism that's referred to as a solar power purchasing agreement, which operates kind of similar to what you're talking about right now.
Great.
I met with Commissioner Kemp a while back, and we began to frame out those discussions, and internally we've been continuing to push it and within the org, and I think you will soon be seeing and hearing more about that in terms of a solicitation coming out. Actually, there's an agenda item on today's agenda related to facilities assessment. That facilities assessment is actually going to provide some very excellent inputs for solicitation for solar power at these facilities, because we're going to get condition assessments, structural integrity of roofs, as well as electrical systems, and that's going to be very important into moving in that direction.
Great, thank you.
I think I saw you, Director Jacob.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is great, Tom. This is a really great presentation, because I think it brings to light the efforts we have, and the realities are on there in our efforts to become more sustainable. And I'm going to jump on Director Shanahan's comments about telling our story more effectively, because I think being able to tell the story of this commitment, number one, is first and foremost important. And secondarily, having our plan in place moving forward. So what is our sustainability plan? What kind of investment do we have to make? I know Commissioner Kemp is greatly interested in electric vehicles and the importance, as we see automated vehicles and electric vehicles come online, with our transfer to compressed natural gas, it's a story that we need to tell the community. So yes, our younger people and our target audience that we, new riders that we want to come on board, where sustainability is critically important as a cultural and lifestyle choice. I think telling that story, understanding how we commit to sustainability is critical to draw these riders in. And so part of that from a marketing standpoint and PR standpoint, I think, is critical, but also being able to tell about what kind of plan we have in place, what are our next steps, what measures are we taking in order to push this forward. Because I think there's a lot of groups out there that we can connect with as well that will help us tell the story, that are out there committed in our community to doing those things. And I think we have a great opportunity here with that.
Director Mendez.
Not to beat a dead horse, but just very briefly want to third the comments about telling our story. I'm actually at the GoHeart.org Environmental and Sustainability Management System page, and it's a little dry. It reports information. This is under the Transparency tab on our website. But I think, and again, you just get a presentation today, but I think a great opportunity would be to mirror or link everything and do a broadcast out on Twitter and social media. So
I agree with you wholly, and I'm glad you did actually go to the site and look at it. What's there now is what was there from day one. It's an area we need to improve in, and in fact, last week I actually had some discussions with Lena and her group about being more strategic in communications and having more of a strategic outlook and planning outward. Based off of what we have here. We have a lot of data, a lot of information, and I definitely feel like we can do a better job of disseminating that, for sure.
Thank you. And great job, by the way, too, as well. I want to add.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for those comments on telling the story. We do have today, pardon me, today we are joined by our newly selected marketing contractor from Clearlight Communications. We are in the process of doing the overall marketing plan, of course, communicating out the route changes and the overhaul to our systems is priority one. So we've been working in tandem with them. It's good, though, to get this comment from the board over to our contractors. So as we're knitting together the final aspects for the overall plan, we have sustainability front and center. We get a lot of credibility when we are speaking to private business partners, when we discuss sustainability. When we know that this agency has the ISO 14001 certification, that transforms how they perceive HART. They don't see us as a small county-focused special tax district. They see us as a progressive entity that is capable of doing what the private sector expects for success, so we become a viable partner. So not just from a sustainability aspect, which is rightly noted, millennials just think we're doing. From a business perspective, it's a compelling story for us to tell. On our webpage, we do have the opportunity for each of our department area experts to go ahead and modify the content, but I'm glad that we are working on a process to make that more formalized so we can actually get that done, as opposed to saying it would be great when we get to. And so, Thomas, I think you're getting voluntold to be a leader in that process. But it is because you have so much outstanding information that is really great for us to push out there. And I know that we have talked to our communications department of doing our media releases this week to focus in on the CNG and the impact. We had talked about this last month when we did the EV presentation for Director Kemp, and the team since was to piggyback on Thomas's presentation today. So thank you for those observations, and I am certain once we have our marketing plan up and running, we'll continue to get those observations, because like everything we do, it will be so excellent we don't notice.
Anyone else? Commissioner Kemp, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you for the excellent presentation. It's great to see all this information. I am glad to hear that we're moving ahead with the, I didn't doubt we would, but to hear that there's been progress made on putting solar panels on our buildings. We should have them on every building already. It will be a great cost savings for us moving forward. And it's a direction for us to move in as expeditiously, I think, as possible. In terms of our CNG versus diesel buses, I guess we have about 190 buses. What's the balance, and what will it be after this year?
Currently, we have, correct me if I'm wrong, but currently we have 22 CNG buses in the fleet, and we have another 25 on the way within the next 6 months.
So there's like about 140 diesel still?
Approximately,
okay.
Yes.
And can you, I'm just a little curious, the relationship between electricity use and CNG, why does it increase so much with CNG?
Well, in order to put natural gas in a vehicle, you have to compress it. And so we were looking at the electricity consumption. We have 4 compressors in our station right now. And we have space for another 2 compressors as we continue to increase our consumption. That compression capacity will have to increase as well. So that electricity consumption is what you're seeing from the consumption of the compressors in the use of natural gas.
Okay, so it seems like maybe that should be also put in. I mean, I appreciate that it's broken out, but it seems like it should be part of the cost of the natural gas as a calculation.
It is.
Okay.
And so when we looked at the total cost, when we looked at fuel by fuel type costs,
right,
those CNG costs include the cost of natural gas, the cost of electricity to compress that natural gas, as well as the operations and maintenance fees that we pay on a per therm basis for the consumption of that gas. So it's a total cost.
It was also really interesting, actually, to see the solid waste and recycling part of it, and I'm glad to know that also is being considered and looked at.
Yeah, I mean, it jumps right off the page, right? I mean, it's a material issue for us, and we need to look at it and see where we can make some improvements. Solid waste management costs. Honestly, this past year was the first year in which the county didn't have a rate increase. So I think we can expect in probably a year or 2 to see rate increases continue to happen. So when you look at it from that perspective, we need to get out in front of it as best we can.
Great job.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Mr. Jones. Appreciate it. Moving to the consent agenda, there's 2 items on the consent agenda. We have a motion to approve those 2 items on the consent agenda.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, let it know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion is adopted. We have an action item, Resolution R 2017-07-30. We had a presentation on this earlier. Any discussion on it? Any further? What's your pleasure? This was the...
Move approval for item 3A.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve item 3A. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion is adopted. I don't have a report, so we'll move to the Chief Executive Officer report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My intent had been to help facilitate a shorter meeting, and I seem to have done very badly at that. So, going quickly, we have 2 slides in front of you. For the CEO report, just wanted to do a touch base. Here we are halfway through the summer. For many entities, they've had their summer vacations. So let's do where we're going for the rest of this fiscal year. You have a chart on the wall. It's also on your overhead. How all our pieces that we have been working on come together. Again, we do consistently bring a TDP and a budget, vision, mission, goals to the board. This year, all of that will look different based on the work that your staff has been doing. So anchoring it back into where we are. You see on this slide and also on the wall the draft mission, vision, and outcomes which were brought to the board in March have been discussed intermittently. We will be joined next month by our staff from TransPro again to make sure we can land this plane that these are the goals and the mission that this entity wants to see going forward from our boards of directors. Based on that, we will continue to proceed with wrapping up our transit development plan, which you will see next month, and our budget. A point to note is in previous years we have brought you KPIs. This year we are bringing you these high-level outcomes. We will continue to track KPIs and potentially produce something in tandem next year, so you see how the KPIs are tracking back against our new outcomes. But we have been working to keep our board focused on our higher-level outcomes, what is important. For instance, rolling into next year's budget, we have, at this point, planned to drop the entirety of the increase in ad valorem, $3.2 million, into fund balance. That will enable us to go forward with the improvements necessary to fund the rest of these outcomes. But we will not be able to put money in the bank and have high-performing routes if we are not very judicious in the service that we're getting on the street and focusing on what is most effective and efficient, not just for our taxpayers, but for our patrons. So just a note, if there is any heartburn on this mission or the vision outcomes, let us know. We're happy to visit separately. We are very excited. to be looking to a dynamic mission and a dynamic vision, as opposed to, we're ensuring transportation, that we take ownership and we can carve out a regional role in being this mobility transition and a thought leader also in transportation, doing it differently in thought, word, and deed. And so the budget process, we will bring you back, incorporates our ZBB. We are at this point looking at a budget that will have about 11% fewer miles on the street, 11% fewer hours, but 14% fewer miles. That's because we're taking out a lot of service, which has historically had very low productivity. That will tie me into my next slide, which we'll get to in just a second. But by bringing you back a leaner footprint, we are able to retire our older diesel vehicles when we take delivery this year of 25 CNG vehicles. That will also help us with our fleet footprint. That also helps us with maintenance. That helps us with reliability. That means we're not keeping these buses over 12 years and we have to do a $50,000 transmission and engine rebuild. So all these factors come in together. And you will see through next year's budget and presentations the impact of the work our staff has done to maximize our best use of resources. We are killing the transportation game, but we are not an administrative firm. We are not a law firm. What are the best uses of our staff time? We love our GC, of course, David. But what is the best use of your taxpayer dollars, and should we recreate these functions that we have private firms that can do very well? So P3's on a lot of scores. Moving into the next slide, you have an update of our system design and outreach. Remember, we have two things going on. The TDP is our traditional 10-year plan. The first year of this is our comprehensive ops analysis. Working with our friends, we have settled on the brand for this as Mission Max, to modernize and align for excellence. So everything you see supportive to this route realignment is now Mission Max. And we'll be pushing that out on all sorts of media and going live with a full campaign on August 8th after the board gives us approval for the schedule change on August 7th. So you see a schedule up through the middle of July. We've continued to have meetings. I and our outgoing Director of Transportation, Keith Sanders, has accepted a position heading all operations in Atlanta. He will have more employees than I do today. So a great coup for Atlanta. Not that I hate them or am jealous. Stealing our good people, but that's okay. But we do take pride in the fact that we've grown up some outstanding talent, and we like getting poached by the big fish. So until we are a big fish, we'll get poached by the big fish. And so Keith and I are going to be in South County tomorrow at Kings Point at the clubhouse, listening to our folks who have concerns on Route 53 and what their alternatives can be. I was on WTMP this weekend for a really good radio spot. The host informed me that they went easy on me, so I look forward to the next engagement. Point being, we've been all over the county. We've heard from a lot more folks than we historically do on our schedule changes, and we are doing a big blitzkrieg on our buses as well. So this is our footprint of where our summer has been going. We will have our public hearing on July 27th. That's 5:30 to 7 here at the eBoard facility. It is a publicly noticed meeting, so of course all board members are welcome to attend. Staff's intent is that everyone who comes there has had an opportunity to come to a community meeting, interface with staff, and get their questions answered outside. If they want to speak to the public hearing officer, who will be our attorney, Carolyn House Stewart, they can speak on the record. But clearly, giving a 3-minute opinion piece is not the opportunity to interact effectively, get questions answered, and have a deeper conversation. So we'll be supporting that broadly. And then for August 7th, your action item will be a highlight of comments received to date, and a recommendation for the board to move forward in one way or another with this Mission Max, this comprehensive change to our schedules. We've been hearing broadly, as we expected, our 85% of patrons who are not on express routes and use us very consistently are very happy. We've been very responsive as well, making modifications to comment. From our friends on the express routes, we are in not a Sophie's Choice, a Sisyphean situation. Many of these routes do operate with metrics that would be much more effectively served by van pools. Clearly, I can say that because I'm not on this express bus. But when we have routes at 5 or 6% fare recovery, it's just very difficult to grow that market. And clearly, the tool we put out does not meet our customer community expectation when that's the utilization that we're seeing. I'm thinking of one route in particular that is $18 per patron. It's $510,000 a year to operate. That's Route 53LX. We receive about $25,000 back in fare revenue. Clearly, we are not addressing that need with that service. So the challenge for us is to determine what is going to meet that patron's need with the tools we have today, and design those tools in the future so we can meet those needs but be cost effective and build for the future. And now I am telling a lie because I'm talking too much and I wanted this to go quickly. So with that, sir, I will turn it back over to the chair.
Any questions? No questions. Thank you. General Counsel report.
No, sir, don't have one today.
Okay. You have some committee reports in your agenda. We now move into public comment. Have anyone for general discussion, general concerns, or public comment? Yes, sir.
Good morning, Board. How are you doing today?
You are who?
I'm David Carter.
Okay.
Good morning, Board. How are you doing today? Good. I ride Route 21LX, the Temple Terrace connector with downtown, the Limited Express, and I've heard rumors that they're going to be disconnecting that service. I'm here to tell you that we have improved ridership on that route quite a bit. The ridership on the first route, 21LX, is at 630. That doesn't have as many riders on it. But the 702 route has improved ridership quite essentially. I've been riding the bus for about 5 years, and that bus has picked up quite a few riders. We also suggest that you guys put a stop for the 21LX in the Net Park area. That would help with ridership and alleviate some of the pressure off the Route 6. The Route 6 is the only local bus we have that serves the Temple Terrace area. And that being said, if there's more service on the Route 21LX and another stop in Net Park, it'll alleviate some of the pressure on the Route 6, helping the Route 6 get downtown in a faster amount of time. As it is right now, if you take the 6 from Temple Terrace to downtown, you're looking at about roughly an hour ride. I ride the bus 7 days a week, going where I have to go. That's my only mode of transportation. I work in downtown, and I have to get from Temple Terrace to downtown. That's roughly about 2 hour ride, depending on what way I go. So with that being said, the Route 21 is my base connection to downtown, and with that bus being disconnected or terminated, the service being terminated on there, you're putting a lot of people at risk of being late for work and missing their connecting buses. Thank you very much, Council. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Could I ask a
Yes.
question?
Sure. Hold on.
Yeah, just curious. You're in Temple Terrace. Are you, by any chance, in the hyperlink service?
No, ma'am. We're nowhere near the hyperlink.
Okay.
The hyperlink area is over there off of connection with Route 5 in the USF area. Where I live off is 56 and Bush. We only have one bus, the 6. Other than that, we have no way to get downtown from that area.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Board.
Thank you. Eric Cloud. Morning.
Morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Gary Cloy, Transportation Advocate. Over the last 14 months, transportation has had a lot of headlines, and I wanted to point a few things out as we get ready to move forward. Last year, May of 2016, all roads lead to Tampa. Then we went to the state of transit back in August, and now we're at the redesign project mode. I think since January, one thing that I've been trying to do and trying to look at everything as an advocate and as an analyst, what does the city, county, and HART really need? And the only answer I could really come up with, honestly, was momentum. How much momentum does this project take to Tallahassee in January? Elected officials have been, for lack of a better word, have been steamrolled in a lot of areas. However, visibility and communication and promoting of transportation is what led 7 cities to get that Smart City Challenge grant. It's elected officials. We need your help to promote transportation and let Tallahassee and Washington, D.C. elected officials know that we, as citizens, it's not all transportation. That's part of it. The other part is the housing part. The numbers, and maybe Miss Beth Alden of the MPO can give you some good background on this. As the numbers in housing and the investment of housing and what the HUD people look at helps the transportation industry receive federal funding. So I hope at some point that people look at this and not look at all just the transit part and get on everybody's back. Some of it is a housing issue, And in fact, the North Boulevard project puts the city of Tampa in a real good position, numbers-wise, as related to the Channelside project. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Vanessa Adam. Did I pronounce your last name right?
Yep,
Thanks.
that's right. I'm here on behalf of Walk Bike Tampa, and I'm also a USF civil engineering graduate student. And I just want to say Walk Bike Tampa supports transit, and most of your daily users don't own a vehicle, so the only way they can get from stop is by using active mode of transportation, which is walking and biking. And which is why, Vision Zero is very important, because safety is our number one priority. And so we would like to work with HART in order to promote, pedestrian cyclist safety throughout Hillsborough County as well as Tampa Bay area. And that's all I have to say, but thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure. Hold on.
Are you currently working with HART, or you're proposing to do some joint activities, or what is it that we can be helpful with?
Well, I'm just an intern for Walk Bike Tampa, but it was my first semester at USF, and Dr. Polzine, he likes to have all his students ride the bus, and I've been car-free for over a year. I moved from Hyde Park to St. Petersburg last month, and so I got here by bus. Or I ride my bike from St. Petersburg to Hillsborough because I work in downtown Tampa. I do have to say it's
every day.
We're still here. Yeah, it's cheaper than the gym membership, to be honest, riding a bike. But the one thing I do have to say, it is not safe crossing the street or in the intersection. Most of the incidents that have been at intersections in downtown. 2/3 of accidents happen between automobiles and pedestrians have been, 5 of them happened in Ashley Drive and Kennedy, and the other one happened on Jackson Street and Morgan Street, which there I helped build a complete street project with the city of Tampa and with Cutter, and try to improve, safety for pedestrians as well as cyclists. But, so how can I help with you guys? Just, Christina Costa is a good person to get accompanied with, and with her I would work and try to design something, and I have a design and thesis already for automotive vehicles.
Well, I appreciate you coming here, because I think this is a very important issue, throughout Tampa. I mean, I'm a weekend bike rider. Like, I wouldn't ride every day to St. Pete. I've done it a fair amount of times, but that's a good morning wake up call to get to work on your bike. But I appreciate you coming and raising this issue, and if there's something that we can do with management, I'm sure they'll follow up and work with you. So thank you for coming.
Before we get to Ms. Egan, Director Geroach. I'm sorry, Jacob.
Thank you. First, thanks for coming out. Walk Bike Tampa and Director Shanahan, I've been working with Walk Bike Tampa for probably 3 years or so now with developing policy and ideas. And they have been a really wonderful community-based organization here that have brought forward ideas. They have been working with HART. In fact, one of their members right now is working with the new bus wrap program for public art. Talking about bike lanes. They have been integral in getting the bike lanes done. They have been integral in talking about the Bayshore Boulevard potential idea of changing that. And they're really great advocates. So anything we can do to work with them. I think they were probably integral in part of our decision to put bike racks on the front of some of our buses as well. So what they're doing in this community, I think, is really wonderful and really good, great work in any way we can partner with them. But I'm proud to work with them on a regular basis on developing concepts and ideas.
Thank you. Ms. Adam, thank you for taking your time. And after the meeting, let me talk to you about NAWIC, the National Association of Women in Construction. I think it would line up nicely for you. And they always have more scholarships than they have recipients, just an observation. Separate from that, right behind you is Marco Sandusky, our Director of Community and Government Relations. So trade contact information, we would be very happy to work with you. Previously, we've done some ad campaigns like 3 feet to pass on the back of our buses, making sure that we can use this as a billboard to highlight safe behavior. But we can do more than that, and it also say to the board, we can get a presentation on Vision Zero. It is expansive, but if we don't own it, it won't happen. And it's completely appropriate for the board to take a position, author a resolution of support. We're all in it together, and again, if folks can't get safely to or from the bus stop, what we do is pretty much irrelevant. So we'll get an update. It's once we survive the budget cycle, and we're going to see you again, okay?
All right, thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. That was my last speaker we had for input. We're now in the old business. Any old business are coming for us? New business. Director George.
Yes, I will try and be brief and respect everybody's time. But I wanted to let me just give a little bit of history. When we've been talking to some of the consultants and planners, and I asked them, what are you doing as far as planning ahead for autonomous vehicle technology, which appears to be a disruptor moving forward. And so nobody can really give a clear-cut idea because it's the future and we don't have crystal balls. So I've been looking into it, reading several reports, trying to get a grasp on it, because I think we as policymakers have to kind of get ahead of it, or at least prepare for it and get out of the way and let it happen. So anything we can do to remove the impediments, I think is going to be very helpful. I know last meeting, I'm inquiring about park and rides and things that maybe we can increase the carpooling, which with some of the apps, might help improve our mobility and get, cars off the road to improve our commute times. I stumbled across a couple of papers. I had mentioned the one Dr. Polzine, Vanessa's instructor, did in November. She's probably very familiar with it. I'll have to talk to you too, because the thesis is on autonomous vehicle technology. And in his report, I have it here, was called "The Implications to Public Transportation on Emerging Technologies." It's a wonderful paper. I kind of skimmed over it, but over the weekend I took a really in-depth, highlighted, writing in the margins, that kind of look at it. And I had Lena send it around to you on Friday, as well as a new report by this gentleman named Tony Seba, who is a futurist, and he kind of has his take on it and how companies like Google is investing billions of dollars. Apple is. I think Google's firm is called Waymo, and they're partnering with Avis to do fleet management, and they're looking ahead in the future to where they can have huge fleets of vehicles available to kind of do what Uber and Lyft do as far as providing transportation as a service. TaaS is what he calls in there. Or an alternate one is called we have Uber Line and Lyft Line and Uber Pool, where you have shared transportation on demand. And so he's taken those service models, and he's applied some costs to them. And so I wanted to come up with a graph. If you want to pass out a copy. So I put together a graph to try and put this all in perspective, to kind of give us a clue. Again, we don't have a crystal ball, but this may be something that we can kind of start to look at. And it seems to me that one of the first things that I would like to see us do is start looking as a performance metric be our operating costs per passenger mile, because that kind of normalizes our how we compare. We can do apples to apples comparison with some of the different types of transportation that's out there. And so first thing I did was look at in Hillsborough County right now, if you want to see the cost per passenger mile of the different options available. Obviously, it's what you might imagine, and what we know from our reports that we see each month is that our HART Plus has got the highest operating cost of about $4.30 per passenger mile. And then the streetcar comes down to a little bit over $3, and then our bus, which is our bread and butter, is about 80 cents a mile. It kind of fluctuates a few pennies depending on where you get your data. The data I'm looking at is a little bit old, but it had it beautifully easy to look at from the National Transit Database, the 2014 stats for HART. That's where I got the three, the HART Plus, the streetcar, and the bus. Next, you'll see TNC high and TNC low, and that would be your Uber and your Lyft. And the high would be when they surge. They have surge pricing, and then they have regular price per passenger mile. And then, of course, the cost to own your automobile. Now, the first three modes of transit, public transit, is your kind of your fixed service. And obviously the other three, the last three on that chart, the transportation network companies and owning your own automobile give you that point-to-point service. Then what I did is in Dr. Polzine's paper, he did an estimate of where he thought a range of possibilities in the more short-term future, let's say within the next 10 years, would be of automated vehicles. And he put that cost anywhere from 20 to 50 cents. So that's what that yellow box is. It's kind of what Cutter's estimate of where those prices could fall. And then I took Tony Seba created a think tank that he calls Rethink X, and he published another report, and that was another link that I had Lena send you. So you have both a little lengthy, so you don't have to apologize if you didn't read it over the weekend and you wanted to get some sun, that's fine. But just maybe as you have time, and maybe hopefully after hearing this, you might have interest in reading and getting the whole in-depth picture. But he has a very optimistic view of where this technology is. Again, his bread and butter is being a futurist, and I'm sure there's some monetary money he's getting his way. So I take his numbers. I think his numbers are very overly optimistic, but on the other hand, I would say Cutter's are a little bit more conservative. So I think the truth kind of lies in between that light blue shaded box and the yellow box. But either way, if you look, let's just for the moment assume that the Rethink X estimates, well, let me back up. The reason he believes the costs are that low is because you're going to have a higher utilization of the vehicles, up to 10 times utilization than your personal vehicle. The other benefit would be in safety. 94% of all fatalities on the road are due to operator error. So there's going to be benefits there in your insurance going down. There's going to be benefits because your car isn't in the shop being repaired as often from colliding with another vehicle. So part of that is why he goes into also looking at electric vehicles, and he also foresees the cost of oil, just not being a sustainable model. But I wanted to focus here on just the cost of this transportation. So if you have nothing more to do than read page 17 of this report, that's by Dr. Polzine, please read it, because he talks about to the extent that alternative mobility options undermine the provision of public transportation, mechanisms will need to be in place to ensure mobility for those with resource constraints. So that would be our role here at HART, is to make sure that as this technology comes on, that we have a way to provide it for those that are dependent and maybe can't afford that car. But if Tony Seba's or that Rethink X model is truly in that vein of possibilities, you can see that even our HART Plus customers, if they were to utilize, they could take 3 or 4 more trips with just the fare that they see. And I forgot to mention the blue part of the HART Plus streetcar and bus is the fare portion that a passenger pays, and the red part would be the taxpayer subsidy. So you can see that all of his, and most of Dr. Polzine's estimates fall very closely in that HART Plus customer, where they could pay less and get point-to-point if they're able to use the automated service. Same with the streetcar. Bus, it's a little bit more of a choice. The bus rider is going to decide, hey, that's where we come in, where we may subsidize those rides or do something to help the mobility of those who truly need it. And it would also give them better service. So some of the policy implications I think we already touched on. And I will say that this is something, in the 5 to 10 year range, so I don't think it's anything that we have to deal with now, but I think we really do need to start planning for that. And that would be the role of our labor force and how we can transition and retrain them, because there will be more possibilities, I believe, for mechanics and people, maybe even more income potential there. So those are some of the things that we will grasp, and I realize this board does it. The other thing would be in long-range planning. Tony Siva's report talks about investing into some of your current technology, and then we have stranded assets later down the future. We can't take advantage of this technology because we've invested in this other type of service, and maybe if it's a federal grant, you got to. If you don't use it, you got to pay to all the money you got back. So those things I think are today that we need to take into effect as we're planning for the future. So I know you guys are very limited on time, and I appreciate your letting me talk to you about this, because I think this is something that is going to revolutionize the way we live in the 5 to 10 year window.
Yes, excuse me. Director Melendez, and then Director Machado.
Director DeRose, thank you for this. I just want to, again, respecting everyone's time. I didn't have a chance to do a deep dive into the documentation you sent, but what I would like to do is I will be looking at it, and specifically, I'd like to kind of use this as a launch point at least. Just so you know, we're here in the sunshine today. Maybe at our next meeting or topics, I would like to kind of even expand the dialogue on. I love your approach. The cost per passenger mile. I also want to look at safety. The impacts of capacity and efficiency from what does the asset provide from a capacity standpoint or improvement versus demand, or ridership even, and then also just the idea of opportunity cost. I think it's great that we're continuing to talk about autonomous vehicles, because when someone else is doing the driving, it opens up from an economic standpoint the opportunity cost to do other things. And I think the way that we look at traffic and congestion and transportation is going to be transformative and disruptive in the next, 5 to 10 years. So I'd like to continue this discussion.
Sure.
Yeah, just to say, and I appreciate that, and I would suggest that this might be a topic for our planning committee to maybe expand on. But yeah, I love the idea of
I think anywhere where we can talk about it more in the sunshine would be great.
Don't share that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest, is that this should go into long-term planning. I think I sent it to Lena over a month and a half ago, and similar vein, approach from a Stanford professor based on economics of what's happening. So I think being aware of the dynamic externally, and then where we can leverage the relationships, both from a pilot project, technology, applications, all of that, because all of these, all the Google and all those people that are investing are going to be looking for communities that are thinking along the lines of how they could come in and test pilot some of the stuff that they're doing. So I think if we're perceived as looking at this and being open to it, it could, open up other doors that we're not even aware of today. So I applaud this research. I think we need to validate the research before it becomes a public document, make sure that we're all talking apples to apples, and because like you have surge pricing here, what percentage of the time is surge pricing? I don't think it's very high in terms of Uber and Lyft. And so you got to be careful about extracting numbers to make an argument that need to be validated elsewhere. But I think the overall challenge is appropriate, and it should go into long-range planning.
See you.
On that note, I would like to state that on July 31st, we will be having our presentations for the Autonomous Vehicle Contract Award. It's a publicly noticed meeting. We are in the cone of silence, so it's a publicly noticed meeting where people can make presentations, but it will be here, I believe, we'll have to confirm the location, 9 a.m. July 31st. The meeting will be recorded for folks who will not be in town or able to attend that. But we anticipate getting some really interesting proposals, because we are the first agency looking at having a consistent service with autonomous shuttles.
Is that an ITN or an RFI?
This is for the actual RFP.
Okay.
We did the RFI, got really good feedback, and also worked with our friends at Qatar to actually have them on contract to be advisors for us. And since Dr. Bertini has worked very recently on this, it turned out to be an excellent relationship and very helpful for us. So this will be the presentations ahead of the evaluation committee. So we will we anticipate an award this year, and are talking about using the award potentially as the foundation point for this year's State of Transit to highlight the good work we've done, but where we are transforming in this thought leader in this area.
Commissioner, Director Geroach.
Jacob.
We'll change names, make it easier for you.
Maybe I'll sit next to him. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for sending this. This is great reading. I didn't go deep dive, but I read most of it. And in my industry, we are constantly having to change now with the new technology and the advancement of these kinds of things that are coming to the marketplace. I think Amazon purchasing Whole Foods is a shot across the bow in terms of new dynamics of changing the way we act. And this is an opportunity for us to change the way we act. I think it's an opportunity for us to redefine public transit. And I think out there in the future, in the next 5 years, we will have a chance to, I think, be the leader and look at ways for public-private partnerships that will support in how this is going to be brought to the marketplace. We have resources already in place that this industry needs in order for them to survive. We have an opportunity to do that and really change the whole face of how we think and different ways of public transit. It's not always bringing people to somewhere. Maybe it's bringing that somewhere to people. So I think it's an opportunity for us. I'm really excited about the potential and would love to dive deep into this to see how we can make it move forward.
Yes, Commissioner Kemp.
Thank you. I've read extensively for a few years and followed everything I could about automated vehicles and their future. I think if we move forward with looking at this, we could bring in perhaps some group that has really, I know we had a presentation when I first got on the board of, it was a consultant, he was from Boston.
David Dixon from Scandinavia.
Yeah, and he had quite a bit of information. I mean, the universe of what this is so much broader even than this. I mean, just in terms of, I understand that 1/2 of all police and law enforcement is traffic. Emergency rooms. Huge amounts of hospital care is traffic. We are also, of course, second in the nation for our pedestrian, this morning with the bike walk, our pedestrian and bicycle deaths, as well as our car crashes. And the fact that the AV vehicles are so much safer, at least we think right now from the studies that are being done, that will, can change everything, change insurance. But I think there are broader things. One of the things that's not included in here is the cost of our roadways, which are incredibly increasing. And, that's not part of this and needs to be thought about. I think automated vehicles could be a wonderful thing for us, or it could be a nightmare. If you think about putting many more automated vehicles that are single occupancy vehicles on our roads, that could be a disaster. I mean, what do you do at the intersection of, Waters and Dale Mabry? How do you handle that? We've heard about how you have less parking downtown, but what about other places? How do our downtown roads take it? If we have single occupancy vehicle, that's why I think it is really important for us with thinking about transit and thinking about right of way for transit and thinking about the role of this agency and where we are with that and how we do it. And also how this rolls out. So I think there's a lot to think about, and it goes, and appreciate this, but it goes way, way far beyond this, and that maybe we could get some from Cutter or others, some work done on this and how we should be considering how we move forward.
Anyone else? Mr. Roach.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments, and that's why I believe putting it as cost per passenger mile, you'll normalize that, so that the reason that the RethinkX numbers are so low is they are assuming on the low end that you're going to do like the Uber pool, where you're going to have multiple occupants, so it would not necessarily be single occupant vehicle. And that's why I think the metric of cost per passenger mile rather than vehicle mile will kind of show you that and make sure that we are looking for ways to encourage multiple passenger adoption. Anyhow, that's all.
Okay. Anyone else? I'm sorry.
I have a comment that's not related to your report, but thank you for bringing it to our attention. I actually let someone else do the driving for me last week. I held a meeting with my constituents who ride Express 21, and I never looked up. I looked at them the entire time. It was wonderful, and it was a pleasant ride, I will say I have one of the passengers here today who spoke to us today. I encourage each of you to do that, because I can tell you right now what they said to me is this: I can't go to those meetings. I'm feeding kids. I have a second job. There are lots of reasons, and I thank you so much for there being a place for them to make a comment on. I see it's on Facebook and online and different things like that. But it was something that me and my thinking that everybody look at all these wonderful meetings that they just simply could not come. So I got an earful. It was pleasant, I will tell you. Number one, the ride was delightful, and the ride home was even more delightful. I saw some parts of Tampa I haven't driven in a while. But I just want to say that the riders themselves are out there recruiting. So I found that to be refreshing, that they're working, and I'm sure you will continue to hear from them some ideas on how they think that they can save some of these routes. I said to them, I can promise you nothing. The numbers are what the numbers are, and we have a business to run, and they understood that I was not there to make any promises or to give them any false hopes, and he's nodding his head, so he's in agreement. But I will encourage everybody to do that. Going to a public meeting is one thing, but I tell you what, get on the bus.
Anyone else? You are George, right?
Yes, I'm George.
Do you have any objection to this going before the Legislative and Strategic Planning Committee?
No, I would like to.
Any objection to that?
No.
Okay, that's what I'm.
Thank you.
Any other new business? Any board comments before we adjourn this meeting? Seeing none, we're going to adjourn this meeting and move into our special board meeting. Directors concerning the potential HART millage rates. I want to call it to order. Is there any input from the public on this issue at this particular point in time? Okay. Seeing none, the presentation is Seaway.
Good morning. Jeff Silver, Chief Financial Officer for HART. This morning, I'm going to present some informational items on what it would look like if HART ever decided to move forward with requesting a millage rate increase. Preface this presentation with the fact that this is not advocacy by staff for a millage rate increase. This is informational material for your discussion purposes. So the first slide is just the history of our millage since FY 2003. You'll notice in FY 2008 a decision was made to take the millage rate down. 8 through 11 were the only years since 2003 that the millage was not at the millage cap of 0.5 mils. And again, this reflects the decision that was made this morning of tentative millage for FY18 being at 0.5 as well. Again, more detail on historic ad valorem since 2007 through our anticipated 2018. Just a few comments of notes. Again, we've talked a couple of times today already, the 0.5 mil cap. The millage cap has been in place as the levied millage rate since 2012. Again, staff recommended that you keep the rate the same for 18, and you have made that decision today. We've seen about a 1% average growth rate since 2007 in property values and in turn our revenues. 5.16% average growth rate since 2012. And then this year, anticipated for 2018, is the highest growth rate that we have seen at ad valorem in over 10 years. And again, obviously, all governmental entities had to bear through the times of the property valuation decrease and so on. So that is actually what's reflected in here as well. This is just a quick, I usually use this chart to show at a Board of County Commission level the use of ad valorem by constitutional officers. Well, what I like to put into this presentation when we talk about ad valorem in its totality is the entire jurisdiction of the county itself. And really to show where we are on the spectrum of all property taxes collected as a whole through Hillsborough County, where HART lies within the percentage of that whole. And again, just for illustrative purposes of how much of a specific tax bill would it be impacted by a millage increase by HART. Now this is the real discussion piece slide. I'll walk through it quickly from left to right. The projected taxable value increase is what is being recommended by the state DOR through 2023. That's as far as they go. And again, it changes a couple of times a year, but this is what we have based on data we have currently. The projected taxable value based on using 18 as that base, growing by state each year. And then we have an adjustable taxable value column. If the voters approve the homestead exemption increase next year, that column will now become that year's adjusted taxable value. Again, we're using calculations that the Florida Association of Counties is using as a broad 4% decrease in ad valorem collection across the board, irrespective of your county or special district. And then ad valorem at 0.5, where we are now and where we have been for the last few years. And then what we did in tenths is to move up 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, all the way up to 1 full mil each year based on that property value estimate for that given year. So as an example, in FY19, if the millage increased from 0.5 to 0.6, it was 42 to 51 million, 59 million for 0.7, and so on. There's a very high-level view of what an impact to a residential taxpayer's tax bill would look like. An effect of a property owner's tax bill at 0.5, which it is today. $200,000 home with no homestead would be $100. $200,000 homestead with a $50K homestead exemption as it exists now, $75. And then with an increase of $75K, $62.50. And then at 0.75, the reason that we chose 0.75 was PSTA's cap is 0.75 as well, I believe. So we wanted to just show what it would look like to measure it across the bay. So you see that impact to a homeowner's tax bill if we went from 0.5 to 0.75. Now, what will we spend any increase on, irrespective of the revenue source? These are our capital unmet needs as they exist today at this very moment. If we were able to fund these in next year's budget, they would be in next year's budget. We have programs from our Intelligent Transportation Service, which is ITS, our CAD AVL needs to be replaced. Capital infrastructure, which does include our vehicles, bus transit infrastructure, our heavy maintenance building replacement. Even though we do have a federal grant for that, it's only a $5 million federal grant, and we're looking at upwards of a $20 million facility needing to be built. Information technology. Over the last couple of years during our capital budget presentations, we've talked steadily about the need to enhance and improve our IT infrastructure, our architecture, to keep up with the demands that we have as an agency promoting more and more technological advanced service options. To do that, we need a foundational bed of architecture to proceed. But each year, we've been pushing that off each year based on availability of funding. So we're looking at a total unfunded capital need of around $103 million. And that does include $55 million of vehicle replacements. And we are able to hobble together federal financing typically every year to whittle down and buy a few vehicles at a time, whether they be 10, 15, or 20 vehicles in a year and a half time period. But we do have really large infrastructure needs that continue to be unmet. And along with the capital needs, and this is based on today's service model, the service model that we have today is has this $103 million need. Now, as you know, we're going through the TDP process and looking at a 10-year new service development plan. And within that service development plan, on top of that $103 million infrastructure need, we're looking at increases needed over the next 10 years as a wish list that you see on the slide here today. Fixed route increasing both operating and our new vehicles, increases in our hyperlink and flex routes. AV, we've talked about that this morning, looking at 5 years of operations for that being within our TDP. And then potentially with the ferry system, which we have are looking at as well, has been added to the 10-year TDP unfunded needs plan.
And to wrap up on the needs plan and the capital plan, we do want to stress that this is the TDP, which is funded based off where we're laying a groundwork today and where we could be in 10 years to get to an optimal network. We do bring the board a status quo plan, which shows what the network looks like based on the funding which we have. And this year, unlike previous years where we built a needs plan based to a referendum or someone else's desire, we built a needs plan based on the principles of the TDP and the operations analysis of how do you get excellent service throughout the county. The direction from the board at our last meeting was to bring information back on what an increase in millage would look like, both from a funds available perspective and what those funds would be allocated toward. So we, of course, have used the TDP, which we will bring you back for adoption. We bring you this just to show the data which is available. Not only is HART prevented from electioneering, but we want to ensure that the staff is being responsive and providing the information for the board conversation.
Is this the full cost of the ferry? Are you bearing? Is that the $10 million? Is that the total cost being borne by HART?
HART is not bearing any costs of the ferry. We are from the quirks of the FTA, we are the recipient for federal transit funds, which are ferry related. So we are including in funding here that if there were an increase in millage, this would be funding to support broader, more robust ferry service. But at this point, HART has no financial obligation.
I understand that. But so what is this $26 million then?
So it is buying additional vehicles for a more robust schedule based on the longer range plan. The application we put in for the ferry program was South County to MacDill Air Force Base. This would be operations and vessels to supplement that with downtown to downtown service, presuming that there is existing infrastructure which can be used for docking, for purchasing additional vessels because there's no funding plan available for them and running that service.
And what's the corollary SG&A that goes with this number in terms of your capital fund, your increase in overhead?
That has not been totally calculated.
Okay. And so if I understand this correct, if there's a millage adjustment, I mean, the ad valorem, does that still do that we still only get 2% of the millage adjustment, or does the millage adjustment come directly to HART?
Directly to HART.
So who are the special districts? Is that who gets that money?
The other 5%, do we know which other special districts?
Fire districts, special water districts, CRAs.
Library board. Board.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah, I'm sure there are. Yes, sir, I am. Thank you.
Hey, Jeff, good briefing. This is always a tough issue. A couple questions on your slides. On the very first slide, you made a comment in fiscal year FY08. It was decided to cap that millage at 4.495. Who decided that?
Who decided that?
Right.
The board.
Okay. And so they decided that in 8, 9, 10, and 11?
George McLean, that's the adopted rollback rate. And not being in Florida, I'm going to get this wrong.
Okay.
But during the housing boom, we had the direction from Tallahassee, instead of just continuing to reap, that we would freeze our millage.
Okay.
And so that's why in those years, it's when the housing values were going up.
Okay. All right. And then on your last slide, your title was 10-year unfunded needs. Really, that's a total of unfunded and funded. Am I correct?
This is a price tag for additional service, which we would add from a needs plan. So as we have asked our folks to price out, this is the delta to fulfill a big needs plan over what we would accrue on the 0.5 mil ad valorem.
Okay.
Any other questions? Let me ask a question here, and I don't want anyone falling out your chairs or passing out, okay? This question probably is for our general counsel. The procedure, if this board had an appetite of looking at the possibility of increasing millage to take it to the voters, this board would have to approve it first, am I correct?
That's correct.
And then we'll go to the Board of County Commissioners?
It'll go to each of the constituent jurisdictions.
So the Board of County Commissioners, City of Tampa, Pinellas City, and Temple Terrace?
Correct.
They would have to approve it there?
Correct.
And then we'll come back to us?
I think it goes back to Hillsborough County to put it out for referendum.
The county commission, and then they
Yes,
would put
sir.
it on the referendum. But they would put it on the referendum.
I believe that's
It would not
correct.
come back here.
Right.
And the length of time to accomplish all that?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Overlay it with the next.
That's what I was thinking.
You got to tag team that with
It
the
would
election.
have, have to be done probably, if it was, say, I'm just throwing this out there. Sure. If it was on the 2018 ballot for that process to take place and for the Board of County Commissioners to vote to put it on the ballot and to have it probably looked at by the Supreme Court. I think the Supreme Court would look at the language on that also?
It's challenged.
Go ahead. You might
If
know
it's
more than I-
challenged, it would have to be.
Yeah. Otherwise, I think you're free to put it on the ballot the way you craft it.
And 75 words or less.
I believe that's the limit.
You would have to be done for the ballot by, I would say, sometime late spring, early summer of 2018.
Okay, so theoretically, and I'm just talking out of my head, theoretically, we wouldn't see any increase if it was approved in probably 19 or 20.
Probably.
Okay.
Probably.
Just putting that in perspective.
Mr. Chairman.
Is it incumbent upon each one of the other jurisdictions to approve it before it comes back? In other words, if City of Tampa and Plant City say yes, but Temple Terrace says no, not saying you would, but if they say, does that then prevent it from going further to the county commission? I just want to know how is that procedurally?
Essentially, what you're doing is amending your charter. And if one of the jurisdictions does not want to amend the charter to increase the millage, which is in your charter, it would appear they are now opting out of HART.
Yeah.
So it would create a very difficult situation.
Okay.
Commissioner Kemp.
And just to be clear, Plant City's already opted out of HART. Is that correct?
They've never opted in. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner.
Director George.
Yeah.
Hey, viewers too. Yeah, I had a question, and maybe staff could come back and do a little bit of research, but I believe in Polk County, the city of Lakeland has opted to have an additional millage rate just for the city of Lakeland transit service. And then my question to our council, maybe we could find out if that's true and how they work it, but then my question more general to you, could, let's say the city of Tampa would like to have increased transit needs and maybe the unincorporated county, not so much. Could they do a referendum to have a special ad valorem tax millage increase, and those funds would be given to HART and to supplement the service within the city limits?
That is not something currently contemplated by your charter. Whether the statute that authorizes the existence of transit authorities allows that, I'd have to look at that a little more carefully. Because normally you have you have to have a uniform rate, and we need to make sure we don't run afoul of that requirement. Off the top of my head, I'd be concerned that we would run afoul of that requirement.
Okay. Do we get, currently I believe we do get grants from the city of Tampa maybe to, let's say they wanted to fund the autonomous vehicle down MTC. Could they not do their own, apart from our charter, they have the ability, if they created a new taxing district, to grant money to HART for specific service requests?
We could accomplish what you're describing. We'd probably do it through an ILA, interlocal agreement. of that nature. If the city of Tampa wanted to fund unique transportation enhancements in the city of Tampa, there's nothing that prevents them from doing so. And if they want to cooperate with HART through an interlocal agreement, they could also do that, as could Temple Terrace.
And Temple Terrace could do the same if
Yes.
they wanted to fund maybe the express service.
Yes, ma'am.
And grant that money in HART, and then just like DOT gives us the money to do regional.
There's usually a way to get there. It's just not always as direct as you would
Right.
hope.
Okay. Yeah, I just it's so polarized. You have people who really want transit, and then you have the other side that they're not going to benefit from it, and they're not going to likely want to see their taxes increase. So, that could be a solution to try and meet everybody's needs if we had the ability for maybe the municipalities to raise, to address the millage rate, and then you wouldn't have the hurdles of going through, the board, the county, the Temple Terrace, and City of Tampa, and then ultimately a referendum. It would just be the referendum for that municipality.
Well, and just one more bit of information. The county is looking at some of these issues as well, because the county is the jurisdiction that has to put this on the ballot and is primarily the responsible entity. So I know they're looking at the uniform rate issue and some of those things, and I can get a hold of the county attorney and find out where they are to get an update.
Councilman Suarez.
Thank you, Chair. And, if we want to really allow the city to have some freedom to do some stuff, and I do mean freedom, I think that maybe the legislature should allow us to do a referendum for us to do either a sales tax increase or any other kind of tax. I agree with you that because we are an urban county and because the city is the place where we gain most, if not all, of our customers, it's important to make sure that the city has some kind of involvement in what our future is going to be. If you look around this table, or not table, but around these tables, most of us are, I think there's probably about 5 or 6 of us that are city dwellers, and some that are living in the outside of the city limits. I don't think that that's a problem, but I do think that sometimes we forget that the city has a real economic interest in making sure that HART is successful. And sometimes we don't get to that point because we discuss some of these very polarizing issues. I personally believe, and there was last week, I think Mr. Vinnick and a few other people from the region went to visit Charlotte. Charlotte uses a sales tax in order to provide the services necessary in Charlotte and Mecklenburg County. So for me, I would like for us to have that ability. I would love to say to my friends that don't live in the unincorporated area of the city that, listen, we're trying to do what's best for us, and we're using our own money to do so. And any way we can push that so that a city has more power to do that, I think that's a good thing for everybody. In your scenario, I think that for that we should just leave HART and start our own system. I mean, to be honest, there's a way to do it that makes sense for all of us. And I think that we need to really come to grips with what the city's needs are specifically, what the county's needs and focuses are, and then figure out where we can meet on common ground to solve regional problems and intra-county problems. And I think we don't do enough of that, not because we here don't think about it, because I think we all talk about it all the time, and I think we all share a lot of great experiences and ideas, and especially what you shared with us today. But I do think that we don't put ourselves in a position of saying we need to really do this in order for us to get a better system and better options and more freedom for our citizens. And that's what, for me, the focus is always how many options can I provide to people so that they have every means possible to get to work, to get their kids to school, to get their kids to daycare, to be able to go anywhere they want to go in the county. What are those options and how are they available to each and every one of us? I think that sometimes we lose sight of that because we're constrained so deeply by both the millage rate that we have here and the size of the county. We just don't have enough money going into our own system. And there's a lot of different ways, and you mentioned some of them, that we can tap into in order to provide a better system. We just haven't come to a realization as to how we go ahead and do that. So if you want to help me, and we can have we can go to the legislature and ask them to do it. Maybe our new representative on T-BARTA can have more of a say in this. I've said it at T-BARTA a few times. It fell on deaf ears, but that's okay. I think that Ms. Shanahan has quite a voice, and I think that she would be a very good advocate for something like that. I know it's something that us on council and the mayor has tried to support. And again, it's just about our own freedom and being able to do some stuff. In terms of the millage rate here, I think that even if we raise the millage rate, we're playing kind of a catch-up game. It's it's like what Satchel Paige used to say. Don't look behind you. Something might be catching up to you. And I think that with what's going to be on the ballot in 2018, it's going to be catching up to us. Not just now in the next 3 years, but it's going to be for the next 10 or 20 years if legislatures continually decide that they're going to do unfunded mandates to cities and counties to eliminate our abilities to provide the services that our citizens want. And if it wasn't that they didn't want services, we wouldn't be here. And that's part of our problem, is that we're constantly churning, but we're not really getting to where we need to be. And I think that we just have to think more broadly as to what each one of our elected bodies do, so that they give them some freedom to figure out what their needs are, as opposed to trying to fit everybody's needs into one basket.
Commissioner Kemp, recognized.
Thank you. I'd like to have a broader presentation, actually, than this, because as I understand it, there are only 2 counties in the state of Florida out of 67 that have millage, that have their transit system supported by millage, and that's Hillsborough and Pinellas. And they're the 2 most meager supported systems in the whole state, especially for a big urban area like this. I think it's an outrage and a shame that we have so little that we dedicate to our transit system from this county. How are they supported in other counties? I've heard about taxes, but actually the sales tax is not the main source of support for other counties. It's just not. I think there is, and this is what I'd like to see the comparisons on. I think one county has a half-cent sales tax, maybe Broward or Miami-Dade. Do you know, Catherine, offhand?
Not off the top of my head.
I just think one. They even put in Sunrail in Orlando without passing a local sales tax to support it. So how did they do it? They did it out of county-wide funds. General revenue that they set aside. That's how they're doing it everywhere else. They make it a priority in their county-wide budgets to have the transit be part of that, because they realize that transit is integral to their success economically, in terms of their land use, in terms of everything else. And I think what we need is a broader presentation that shows us how they're getting funding elsewhere, and we understand where we are. And by the way, even in the state of Florida, I mean, other states, especially states that have successful transit systems, have state funding for operating for transit systems. Because, again, they realize, too, that this is good for taxpayers. It saves us on building our roads out to some crazy, unsustainable degree. And it is a more efficient way to move people and to build our communities. So I think that what we need is a bigger picture. I'd like so we can understand how we are funded compared to other places, and then how we're expending our funds compared to other places. I think it's a shame that we operate even with Pinellas. I mean, we don't even have them here. The only other county that has, as I understand it, ad valorem, and they're at 3/4 mil compared to our 1/2 mil. They have 1 million people. They have 1/3 of the land mass of Hillsborough County. They have, and yet they're getting, more for their transit system. We have 3 times the land size. We have a 1/2 mil. It's just really sad, and it shows a lack of commitment in every way about funding transit. I just go for the, whatever. I mean, I just think we should be having our state moving in on this to say that this is urgent and we need it. We should be having our county commission set aside county-wide funds recognize the importance of, for economic development, for everything else that we need for our transit system. And we can look at this but I think it's also narrow to think about it in just the city versus county or something like that. I mean, practically every single route we have crosses city and county lines, whether that be to USF or across to across Hillsborough Avenue, our major routes, Nebraska, our biggest routes. They don't stop at the city line, and as well as our ferry system. Will be serving countywide. So I think it's time for us to stop thinking about small like this and stop thinking about miserly and start thinking about how other counties are doing it, what we need, and how we fund it. We should not be dependent on just this. But I'm supporting this. I'm supporting anything because I think we are critical care where we are now. I think it is just shameful. And I guess, I've just been in communities in the last 2 weeks. We had our meeting free period, and I rode public transportation everywhere. I was in Denver. I was in the state of Rhode Island, which is equal in size to, Hillsborough County, but has about 300,000 fewer people. And I took trains there, and I took free buses, circulator buses, and I rode a bus. I went to Montreal. I rode a bus from Montreal to Quebec, and I, was all over the public transit at all these places. It's just, what we're doing is so inadequate, and it is so critical that we do something more in every way. So I would ask that we have a broader plan that we have a broader presentation that is comparative for how we can move ahead in all ways.
We will pull state data, but we will use also the national comparators from our TDP because that's a subset we've already chosen and get some data back on their funding.
And I also think we need to ask our county commission to do a set aside of countywide funds that are, a recognition that we need to be funding our transit in a greater way. It's just what we have is totally inadequate, and that can be done by a county commission vote, and is done by county commissions across the state. I just think we need to do that.
Yes, sir, Mr. Menendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Briefly. Commissioner Kemp, thank you for your comments. And I'd like to say that, some of the background that you provided from a state perspective with regard to the other counties and how transit is funded. Just to clarify one of your comments, you said that Hillsborough and Pinellas are the only two counties in Florida that rely on
I believe so.
On millage? Okay. To your point, I think it was revealing, and I would like to learn more. When I look back at the slide where it breaks down, 44% VOCC, it was the ad valorem comparison. I'd be interested to see what other breakdowns are in other counties with, you call them, vibrant, or whatever adjective you want to use,
right.
Transit. What other transit systems relative to ours, how that percentage lays out? Because when I look at 2%, I don't want to make any judgments or, it just look at the numbers. We say transportation is a priority, but 2%. And you could make the argument that under BOCC there's the Sunshine Line and perhaps and roads and bridges. But I think you make a great point, and you've really kind of given me a different paradigm here, and I think we should keep talking about it. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
The only I think before you go to the voters and ask for more money, you have to make sure the system you're running is running well. And I made this point a couple meetings ago. And I think we have to continue to, when I look at a list of unfunded needs, I don't believe that to be unfunded needs. It's about prioritization of services. So I think building on Director Jarosh's challenge in terms of how do we measure ourselves, what's a successful system look like? And you've got a lot of in transit and in transition, with technology, with the disruptions happening with the counties, with the regionalization, with where the funding is. And so you're not going to come down perfectly, but I think you got to be very clear about when you're going to say you're going to go from a $40 million system to a $109 million system or $1 billion, that you're looking at how would you advocate for that? How do you defend that? How do you, I'm always a big believer if you're going to ask voters to engage, to give you more money, that it's a set period of time, and it is a deliverable product that they're going to see at the end of that. And I think for, to go on forever with some, I would say bloated system, you got to be very careful about where people are going to end up, whether they use the services or not. So there has to be justification, there has to be validation, and I'm not sure, I think we're getting there, but we would not have looked at this $7 million increase with all these savings that we're seeing on just this bus rerouting if there was not fiscal constraint, I have to say. So I think fiscal constraint drives efficiencies that if you have superfluous money, it can get misspent very quickly.
Commissioner Kemp.
I just want to say that I think other places have looked at it even when they haven't quite been driven by those fiscal constraints because they've just been good about redoing their bus systems. It's a thing that's really happening across the country now. In Seattle and Portland and Houston and many other communities are doing kind of the thing that we're looking at. It does seem to have been driven here by the fiscal constraints that we've had. I agree with you totally. In terms of plan, this I assume is not a plan, but just kind of something that was just quickly put together. We could not go to the voters with this. That would be totally inadequate. So I agree with you that we need a plan. That is one of the issues that I've had for a long time. That we are looking at our efficiencies and need to do that and increase our ridership to the extent we can with the dollars that we have. But I also think, above all, we are so meagerly and miserly in funding our transit. It's shameful. And that, we need a plan about how we're going to do it. But I think some of the parts of the plan haven't been made because we've been so underfunded, but also because we haven't had any opportunities to be thinking about what we would do. And so we need to get that on board. I agree with you totally.
And Commissioner Kemp, that is an excellent point. Next year, now that we've had the opportunity to do a reset for business and for our routing, next year our planning staff will take our 10-year TDP status quo and also vision plan and take it out another 5 years, marry it to a capital plan, and then we, as a transit agency, can own our quasi-long-term planning perspective. Since I've been here in the Tampa Bay region, our transit entities look at a year or two of service because we haven't looked at longer-term funding and we haven't looked at where we are going. That turns over a lot of our planning responsibilities to our MPOs, which have a wonderful staff. I've worked at MPOs, we love them, but the transit agency needs to own what the transit agency is going to do and use an MPO for coordinating roles. So look for that next year, a longer-range plan that we can then turn into a 3 to 5 year targeted action plan. And we can pull the trigger and we can go forward. But to your point, when it comes to what is the plan for big expenditure, that is a significant undertaking. Multimodal, not the kind of thing that is done quickly or lightly. That's it, sir.
Anyone else? So.
We've stirred a lot of pots here today.
I think we got a couple of things that are being asked here, and I want to make sure we clarify it from Commissioner Giroux, not from Commissioner, from Director Giroux's issue. I think she was asking for, if I'm not mistaken, information on if municipalities can have dedicated funding source through a millage rate increase. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I think that who you asking?
And then staff to investigate whether Lakeland does something like that.
Okay. Then I heard from Commissioner Kemp concerning a long-range plan, and I think you answered that we were looking into that.
And also a presentation on funding throughout the state and in comparable entities across the country.
Okay. Then I heard from Councilman Suarez concerning the fact that cities having the opportunity to tax themselves. Let me. I don't know if you knew this, that there was discussion on this last year. That there was discussion with our local delegation to look at possibly taking something to Tallahassee, where cities, not only Tampa, but other cities with a population, I think it was 250,000, would have an opportunity to put something on the ballot themselves. It went nowhere within the delegation. They didn't have an appetite for that at all. So I don't know what their perception would be for them in the future, but there was no appetite for that at all.
Oh, and Commissioner Miller, if I can, I totally understand that.
Yeah.
I think that part of what our problems are is that we have, especially in the House, we have a anti-municipal type of viewpoint in terms of whether or not we should use dollars.
We can't
in
govern
fact,
control him. Go ahead.
Listen, and in terms of even things that provide lots of economic opportunity, like community redevelopment agencies, and they wanted to eliminate that. And I just thought that was a silly argument. And again, there's a lot of silly things that happen in governmental bodies. They're not exempt from it. But I would say I think that we should, and if I could make a suggestion, that maybe we can look at, and I will talk to. Maybe we'll talk to the county attorneys and also the city attorney as to whether or not we can actually put on the ballot a referendum that only deals with the city of Tampa concerning sales taxes. Now, I don't know if that's possible, but the county would have to approve it to allow us to do it, let's say, during the city election. It's a little bit of a different twist. The county still has the power to put the referendum on there, but it would only affect the city. I'm not sure if that's possible, but I'd like to look at it.
I don't know if that's possible or not. That's something we'd have to look at and investigate.
Wouldn't you bifurcated jurisdictions?
What's that?
Wouldn't that be bifurcated jurisdictions?
I don't know. I don't know what the answer would be. That's why I want to ask. Always ask the lawyer because they'll tell you 15 different ways why you can't do something.
Mr. Kemp,
we can get an opinion on that, but I think that's clearly why. It's clearly been determined that we cannot do that.
I haven't seen that, but if you're a lawyer too, so maybe you're the one who read that. So
I have been familiar with it, and that's why we're been lobbying at the state level to do that, to change. But it's certainly is from all accounts prohibited now.
Okay. Any further discussion before we adjourn? Seeing none, we adjourn. Commissioner.